Welcome to Heartfelt Revenge Stories. My sister Jessica has this gift. She can destroy a room without raising her voice. She just smiles, says something charming, and lets everyone else do the damage for her. That's exactly how it started at my cousin Sarah's wedding. I showed up at the venue running late because my flight landed behind schedule, and the rental car line crawled forward like it was being powered by a tired hamster. I changed in the airport bathroom, tried to fix my hair in the mirror like that would somehow make everything better, and drove straight to the reception hall. The place was one of those converted barns that probably cost more than my first car, and came with fairy lights as its entire personality. There was this huge wooden sign near the entrance that said, "Happily Ever After." Jessica should have been standing right next to it, selling illusions by the pound. I walked in and spotted Sarah immediately, glowing like she hadn't spent the last 6 months stress-sweating over seating charts and centerpiece decisions. She practically ran over and hugged me so tight my ribs protested. "You made it," she said, like she'd been holding her breath all day. "Wouldn't miss it," I told her. Had to threaten a TSA agent with my worst small talk, but I got here. She laughed, then pulled back and looked at me with that worried expression people get when they know your family is basically a walking disaster zone. "You okay?" she asked quietly. "I'm fine," I said, which in my family is basically code for, "Please don't ask more questions." Please subscribe and like this video and listen to my story till the end. Let me know which city you're listening from in the comments. That way I can see how far my story has traveled. Trust me, you'll want to hear how this unfolds. I found my seat card and felt my stomach drop. Table 15 way in the back, nowhere near Sarah. Nowhere near the people I actually wanted to sit with. It was basically the witness protection program for unwanted relatives. I didn't blame Sarah. I knew exactly who orchestrated this. Jessica floated over before I could even set my clutch down. She looked absolutely perfect, of course. Hair done like she just stepped out of a salon. Makeup flawless, dress expensive enough to make you feel guilty for breathing near it. "There she is," Jessica announced, like she was introducing a celebrity who'd really let themselves go. "Our little Navy girl." I smiled politely. "Hi, Jess." Her eyes immediately flicked down to my dress. Navy blue, simple, nothing dramatic. I didn't come here to outshine the bride. Also, I just didn't have the energy for that kind of statement. "This is very you," she said, tilting her head like she was studying a painting she didn't quite understand. "It's giving corporate office meeting." "It's giving wedding guest," I replied. She laughed, but it wasn't the kind that reaches your eyes. Then she leaned in like she was about to share a deep secret. "Just a heads up," she said sweetly. "Try not to do the whole Navy thing tonight. People are here for Sarah and Daniel, not for, you know." She waved her hand vaguely in my direction like my entire existence was some weird hobby nobody asked about. I nodded slowly. "Don't worry. I'm not here to recruit anyone." "Good," she said brightly. "Because last time you talked about work, Aunt Margaret asked me if you actually drive the boat." I stared at her. "Aunt Margaret thinks the ocean has traffic lanes." Jessica's smile widened. "Exactly. So let's just keep everything light and fun tonight." "Okay." Then she walked away, already scanning the room for her next audience. I sat down at table 15 with people I only recognized through shared DNA. A second cousin I'd met exactly once at a funeral. A great aunt who smelled like expensive perfume and unsolicited opinions. Some guy who looked like he'd rather be trapped in bumper-to-bumper traffic than attempt small talk. They all did that polite thing where they smile briefly, then immediately start looking for someone more interesting to focus on. "So Amanda," my great-aunt said, dragging my name out like it had lint stuck to it. "Jessica tells us you work at the naval base." I kept my face completely neutral. "I'm in the Navy, yes." She nodded slowly, like she was processing complicated information. "Doing what exactly?" "Submarines," I said simply. Her eyebrows jumped up. "Oh, like paperwork for submarines." I took a careful sip of water. "Something like that." That was my first mistake. In my family, any small opening becomes a full-blown theatrical performance. Across the room, Jessica had already formed her little circle of admirers. I watched her lean in, hand dramatically pressed to her chest, laughing like she was telling the funniest story anyone had ever heard in their entire lives. Then I heard my name. Not loud but loud enough. The kind of calculated volume that's specifically meant to travel across a crowded room. Amanda's always been so intense, Jessica said, projecting just enough. She'll tell you she's doing submarine stuff, but it's mostly administrative work at the base. You know how it is, someone's got to handle the schedules and reports. Someone in her group actually laughed. I stared straight ahead like I hadn't heard a single word. My jaw tightened anyway. Sarah's mom walked by and gave me a sympathetic look. She didn't stop though. Nobody ever stops. In my family, stepping in to defend someone is considered incredibly rude. Public humiliation, on the other hand, is perfectly fine as long as it gets a few laughs. Drop a like if you've ever been to a family event where you're the target instead of the guest. Let me know in the comments if this is hitting too close to home. Dinner happened in a blur. Speeches started rolling in. Daniel's parents spoke beautifully. Then Sarah's mom gave a touching tribute. People clapped, some cried, others dabbed carefully at their eyes with cocktail napkins. The room softened into something that almost felt safe for a moment. And then my dad stood up. Robert Mitchell. He's the kind of man who absolutely loves the military in theory. Flags, parades, patriotic slogans on bumper stickers. He'll thank complete strangers for their service in the grocery store checkout line, but somehow forget to ask his own daughter how she's actually doing. He tapped his glass with a fork. The room quieted down immediately. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, smiling like he was about to bless everyone with profound wisdom. "I just want to say how incredibly proud we are of Sarah and Daniel." Polite applause rippled through the crowd. Dad continued, turning toward the groom with genuine warmth. "Daniel, you're the real deal. Navy officer, submarines. That takes serious guts. That's real service right there." Daniel nodded respectfully. He seemed like a genuinely good guy, calm, steady, the type who doesn't need to be the loudest person in the room to command respect. Dad lifted his glass higher. "And you know," he said with a little chuckle, "we've got another Navy person in the family." My stomach dropped before he even said my name. He pointed directly at me with his glass, like spotlighting me for the entire reception. "There she is," Dad announced proudly. "My daughter, Amanda." Every single head in that room turned like I was being put on trial. I felt heat rush up my neck and into my face. I forced the smallest smile possible, because that's what you do when you don't want to cause a scene at someone else's wedding. Dad kept going, completely oblivious. "Amanda likes to tell people she's in the Navy too," he said, his smile getting even wider. "But she's not exactly doing what Daniel does." A few people laughed nervously. Not mean laughter exactly, more like confused laughter. The kind people make when they're not entirely sure if something's supposed to be funny, but they definitely don't want to be the only person sitting there like a stone statue. Jessica's laugh was by far the loudest. Dad shrugged like he was being humble on my behalf. "She works at the base," he explained casually. "Desk job kind of stuff. Paperwork, schedules, you know. Important work, I guess, but not exactly the glamorous side of things." I sat perfectly still, hands folded carefully in my lap, feeling like my chair was slowly sinking into the floor. Someone at my table murmured, "Awkward." I wanted to disappear completely. I also wanted to grab that microphone out of his hand and explain a few very specific things. But I didn't move. I stayed right where I was because Sarah deserved one single night without my family turning everything into an absolute cage match. Dad raised his glass even higher. "So here's to Sarah and Daniel," he declared warmly. "May your marriage be filled with the honor and dedication that real service requires." The room echoed the toast enthusiastically. Glasses clinked together. People smiled and nodded. The band started playing again, and I just sat there, watching my own father publicly shrink my entire life down into a punchline while my sister practically sparkled with pure satisfaction across the room. That was the exact moment I decided I was leaving early. I pushed my chair back carefully, quietly. No drama, no announcement, just a clean, simple exit. As I stood up, someone stepped directly into my space. It was Daniel. He didn't smile like a wedding guest making polite conversation. He looked focused, almost tense, like he just heard something he absolutely couldn't ignore. "Ma'am," he said quietly, the word coming out like pure habit, not politeness. "Could I speak with you for just a second?" He wasn't asking like a cousin-in-law trying to make small talk. He was asking like someone who knew exactly what he was doing. Daniel nodded toward a side hallway near the exit doors. Just for a minute, he said calmly. I followed him, trying desperately to keep my face neutral, even though my heart was pounding against my ribs like it wanted out. My feet kept moving down that side hallway, but my brain was still stuck on my dad's glass pointing at me like I was some kind of joke wearing a dress. Daniel stopped near a service door where the music faded into a muffled thump. The lighting back there was dimmer, the air noticeably cooler, like even the building itself understood this conversation didn't belong anywhere near the dance floor. He turned to face me and hesitated for half a second, like he was carefully deciding whether to say what he was about to say. "Commander Hayes?" he asked quietly. I didn't answer right away. My first instinct was to shut it down completely, smile politely and pretend I'd misheard him. My second instinct was even worse, to ask him why on earth he was calling me that when I'd spent literal years making absolutely sure nobody in my family ever did. So I went with the only option that wouldn't make me look like I was auditioning for some daytime talk show drama. "Yes," I said simply. Daniel's shoulders lowered slightly, like he'd been holding his breath waiting for confirmation. "Okay. Thank you," he said. I didn't want to be wrong about this. "You're Daniel," I said, studying him more carefully now. "Daniel Cooper." His face flickered with recognition. "Yes, ma'am." That ma'am wasn't a wedding thing. That was pure muscle memory. I exhaled slowly through my nose. "How do you know me?" He rubbed the back of his neck, looking genuinely uncomfortable. "This is going to sound absolutely crazy because you and I'm standing here in a tux at my own wedding, but welcome to my entire night," I said flatly. Daniel gave a quick, tense smile. "I'm the engineering officer on the USS Montana. We've been in several joint operational briefs with your team over the last year." I kept my face still, but my stomach tightened immediately. That was real. That was specific. That wasn't some random guy trying to impress his new in-laws with generic military buzzwords he'd picked up from action movies. "You didn't recognize me," I said carefully. "Not at first," he admitted. "You look different out of uniform and your hair is down. But when your dad said your name just now, it clicked. And then when he started talking He stopped himself like he didn't want to insult my father at his new wife's cousin's wedding reception. The man had manners. My family could really learn something from that. "Like I'm a receptionist," I finished for him. Daniel's jaw visibly tightened. "Yes, ma'am." I held up one hand. "Stop with the ma'am. We're at a wedding. If anyone overhears you using that tone with me, it'll turn into a whole ridiculous thing." He nodded quickly. "Understood. Sorry. It's just habit." "It's fine," I said. "It's just not particularly helpful tonight." Daniel looked past me toward the main reception hall. "Does your family really not know what you actually do?" "They know I'm Navy," I said evenly. "They've just decided what that means for themselves." He frowned deeply. "But your dad just told an entire room full of people that you do paperwork." "Yeah," I said, keeping my voice flat. "He did." Daniel didn't laugh. He didn't make a joke. He looked genuinely rattled, like he'd accidentally stepped into some alternate reality that didn't match any story he'd been told. "Commander," he said again, softer this time. "Why would he say that?" I stared at the wall for a long moment, because if I looked directly at Daniel while answering that particular question, I might accidentally tell the complete truth with my whole face. "It didn't start tonight," I said finally. "Tonight was just the very public version." Daniel waited patiently. He wasn't pushing, but he also wasn't letting me dodge the question either. So I gave him the short, clean version. The version that fit neatly into a hallway conversation between a wedding reception and a family implosion. "Jessica has been telling people I'm basically a glorified admin assistant for years," I explained. "She says it like she's being helpful, like she's translating my complicated life into something everyone can easily understand." "And your dad believes her?" Daniel asked carefully. "My dad believes what's comfortable," I said. "And what's comfortable is the idea that I didn't really make it. That I'm not actually successful." Daniel's eyes narrowed. "But you did make it." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it sounded so ridiculously simple when a stranger said it out loud like that. "Yeah," I said quietly. "I did." Comment below if you've ever had family rewrite your accomplishments to make themselves feel better. This gets worse before it gets better. Daniel looked like he wanted to say more, launch into some kind of motivational speech, but I cut him off before he could turn into a one-man award ceremony in a hallway. This stays between us, I said firmly. I'm serious, Daniel. His eyebrows rose. Amanda, why? Because it's Sarah's wedding, I said. She doesn't deserve to have my dysfunctional family turn her beautiful reception into some kind of courtroom drama. Daniel's mouth tightened. Your family already turned it into something. I ignored that completely. And because the second my sister realizes that you know the truth, she'll make it entirely about herself. She'll act like I'm deliberately trying to embarrass her in public. She'll cry or yell or call me arrogant. And then my mom will beg me to apologize just to keep the peace. Daniel stared at me. That's incredibly specific. It's predictable, I corrected. He glanced toward the door again, like he could somehow hear Jessica's voice even through the walls and the music. So your sister has been actively telling people you're just a desk job? Yes. And people believe her because it fits the exact role they've already assigned you, I said. The role where I'm the overly serious one who doesn't know how to relax, and Jessica is the fun, charming one who keeps everyone together and happy. Daniel's expression hardened noticeably. That's seriously messed up. I shrugged. Welcome to the Mitchell family. We come with free guilt and absolutely zero refunds. Daniel let out a short breath, then lowered his voice even more. How long has she been doing this? Spreading this story about you? Years, I said simply. But she ramped it up recently, he said, reading between the lines. I didn't want to say it out loud because saying it made it real. Saying it meant Jessica hadn't just been casually annoying or thoughtless. She'd been actively preparing for something like tonight. But Daniel had already clearly seen that something was very wrong. And I wasn't going to insult his intelligence by pretending my dad's toast was just some random slip of the tongue. 3 weeks ago, I said carefully. Family group chat. Jessica started asking these seemingly innocent little questions. So what do you actually do day to day? Are you still working at the base? Do you ever actually go underway? Stuff like that. Daniel's eyes sharpened with understanding. And other people joined in. They always do, I said. They don't mean anything by it. They think it's just normal small talk and catching up. I paused, then added. Jessica also called my dad directly. I'm not guessing about that. My mom told me she did. Daniel's eyebrows lifted. What did she tell him? Probably something like, Dad, I'm genuinely worried Amanda's going to make the wedding all about herself, I said. Or she gets really sensitive when people ask basic questions about her job, which is Jessica's special language for, let's poke her repeatedly until she reacts badly. Daniel looked like he wanted to break something. He was holding it together only because he was still technically at his own wedding reception. She wanted this to happen, he said slowly. Yes, I said. The word landed hard even in that quiet hallway. Daniel's voice dropped even lower. Why would your sister do something like this at a wedding? Because it's a stage, I said simply. She didn't pick some random Tuesday afternoon. She picked a room absolutely full of people, a microphone, and a specific moment where nobody would want to challenge her or cause a scene. Daniel stared at me for a long, uncomfortable moment. And you just take it? I met his gaze directly. I don't take it. I manage it. He looked genuinely confused. What's the difference? I've learned something the hard way, I explained. If you actually fight Jessica head-on, she wins anyway. Because then it becomes a scene. It becomes Amanda totally overreacted. And the original lie just gets completely forgotten. All anyone remembers afterward is that I ruined the mood and caused drama. Daniel's mouth tightened with visible frustration. That's not fair. I didn't say it was fair, I replied. I said that's how it works in my family. He ran his hand through his hair again, clearly restless and bothered. So what do you want me to do? Nothing, I said immediately. He blinked. Nothing. Yes, I said firmly. Smile, dance, be the groom. Let Sarah have her perfect night, and let my family think whatever they're going to think regardless. Daniel didn't look convinced at all. He looked like a man trying desperately to follow an order that went against every single one of his core values. I can do that, he said slowly, reluctantly. But I'm not going to pretend I didn't hear what your dad said up there. You don't have to pretend, I said. You just have to not correct him publicly. Daniel stared at me intensely, then nodded once, tight and extremely reluctant. Okay. I believed he genuinely meant it in that moment. I also knew Jessica. Jessica could smell restraint like a hunting dog smells fear in the air. Jessica wasn't done. Not even close. What she did next crossed a line even I didn't see coming. From the other side of that service door, the music suddenly swelled again. The reception was rolling right along without us, like absolutely nothing had happened. Like my dad hadn't just reduced my entire career to office supplies and filing cabinets. Daniel put his hand on the door handle, then paused before opening it. Commander Amanda, he said quietly. For what it's worth, I'm really sorry this happened. I didn't thank him. Gratitude felt way too close to permission, and I absolutely wasn't giving my family permission to make me small ever again. It's fine, I said, even though it definitely wasn't. Daniel opened the door, and the noise rushed back in loud, bright, overwhelming. I followed him out, putting that polite smile back on my face like a mask I'd worn for so long it almost felt natural. Across the room, Jessica was positioned by the bar with her little group, laughing like she'd personally invented joy itself. When her eyes landed on us walking back together, her smile didn't fade exactly, but it sharpened considerably. She watched Daniel like he was a loose thread she couldn't wait to pull. Jessica's smile stayed perfectly glued on as we crossed the room, but I felt it tracking me like a laser pointer on a skittish cat. Daniel drifted back toward Sarah, doing all the proper groom things. Shaking hands, accepting congratulations, acting like he'd literally trained for this role. I veered back toward my table because I absolutely didn't trust myself anywhere near an open bar, and I definitely didn't trust Jessica anywhere near a microphone. I sat down and picked up my water glass again, like adequate hydration could somehow fix decades of family dysfunction. My great-aunt immediately leaned in close. What was that all about? She asked, eyes bright with the kind of invasive curiosity that comes from living long enough to run completely out of actual hobbies. Nothing, I said smoothly. Just saying hello. She made a face that clearly said she didn't buy it for 1 second, but she also didn't care quite enough to actually press the issue. She went right back to loudly critiquing the chicken. I watched Jessica from across the room. She had her phone out now, tapping away quickly, probably sending messages in the family group chat from literally 10 feet away. Jessica absolutely loved an audience, but she loved controlling the entire narrative even more. That's the thing most people don't really understand about my sister. She doesn't scream dramatically. She doesn't throw drinks in faces. She doesn't do the over-the-top soap opera stuff you see in movies. She's way smarter than that. Jessica plants a very specific version of reality and then just lets it grow naturally. And in my family, it grows incredibly fast because everyone's already standing there holding the watering can. I could have shut this down years ago, honestly. I could have corrected people every single time they casually called my job base work or support services. I could have pulled out my phone and said, actually, I'm an unrestricted line officer, submarine warfare qualified, and watch their faces do that blank thing people do when they realize they've been confidently wrong about something. But that's not how it actually plays out in real life. In real life, you don't get one big heroic moment where everyone stops talking and applauds and says, "We're so sorry, Amanda. We completely misjudged you." In real life, you get eye rolls. You get heavy sarcasm. You get, "Wow, okay, Captain America. Maybe calm down a little." So I just stopped trying eventually. Hit the like button if you've ever given up trying to prove yourself to people who refuse to see you. Drop a comment about what finally made you stop caring what they thought. It started way back when I was 19 and got accepted into the Naval Academy. My dad threw this massive party. Not a quiet family dinner either. A full-on backyard barbecue situation with burgers and American flags and him telling literally anyone who'd stand still long enough that his daughter was going to be a military officer. He looked genuinely proud in a way I didn't see from him very often. Jessica looked proud too at first. Or at least she looked like she desperately wanted people to think she was proud. She posted photos on social media with captions like, "My amazing sister is going to serve our country. So proud." Then the attention started shifting from her to me, And I watched the temperature change in real time. The academy was hard. Not in some dramatic movie way. Hard in a very real way where your schedule doesn't care even slightly about your feelings and your body feels like it belongs entirely to the government. I came home on breaks absolutely exhausted and quiet, and Jessica would immediately call it acting superior. I remember sitting at the kitchen table once, just trying to eat a simple bowl of cereal in peace. Jessica walked in and said, "So, do they teach you how to yell at people yet, or does that come later?" I didn't even look up. "They teach us how to listen," I said quietly. She laughed like that was genuinely the funniest thing she'd ever heard in her life. "Sure. You're going to be one of those." "One of what?" I asked. "One of those people who thinks their job makes them automatically better than everyone else." I said, "I'm literally just trying to finish my cereal." She rolled her eyes and walked away like I disappointed her by not starting a fight. And my dad, of course, heard about it later and said, "You don't have to be so sensitive, Amanda. She's just joking around." That became the family motto pretty quickly. She's just joking. She's just being blunt. She's just being honest. Meanwhile, I was learning that the absolute fastest way to lose in my family was to react emotionally to anything. After I graduated and got commissioned, I specifically picked the submarine community. That decision alone turned into this whole dramatic thing. My dad acted like I just announced I was moving to Mars permanently. "Submarines?" he said, like I'd suggested something completely insane. That's really intense. Is that even appropriate for you?" "For me." I repeated carefully. "For a woman," he clarified, like he was doing me some massive favor by saying the quiet part out loud. Jessica jumped right in, smiling sweetly. "I mean, Dad's just worried about you. It's a really tough world. Maybe you should pick something a little easier." "I picked what I earned," I said. Jessica's smile tightened noticeably. "There it is." My dad started telling everyone I was going into some kind of specialized program. He didn't say submarines again for literal months. It was like if he didn't name it directly, it somehow wasn't real. When I finally earned my submarine warfare qualification, I called home. I was proud. Not show-off proud, just genuinely proud of myself. My mom answered and she was happy for me in that soft, careful way she has. Then she put my dad on the phone. He said, "So what is it exactly? You got a pin or something?" "Yes," I said. "It's actually a really big milestone." He paused briefly, then said, "Okay, good." That was it. No follow-up questions. No real interest. Just a quick good like I told him I changed my car's oil. Jessica texted me later that same day. "Must be nice getting trophies just for doing your job." I stared at that message for a really long time. Then I deleted it without responding. Over the years it got progressively worse, not better. Not because my career was somehow secret, because my career simply didn't match the story Jessica wanted to tell about me. At family events, if someone asked what I did, Jessica would answer first every single time. "She works at the base," she'd say casually. If I tried to correct it, Jessica would make this face and go, "Okay, sure, whatever you say, Amanda." If I stayed quiet, the moment would just pass, and then my dad would walk over later and say, "Why do you always have to make things so awkward?" Me. Not Jessica. Not the actual lie. Me. So I stopped correcting people. I learned to make my life deliberately small in that room so I could keep some semblance of peace. The funny thing is, outside that room my life was anything but small. I spent years learning a job that absolutely punishes ego and rewards pure competence. You don't get to be dramatic on a submarine. You don't get to slam a door and storm off to your room. You learn to speak clearly, make critical decisions, own your mistakes completely, and keep people alive. You also learn to keep your mouth shut. Not because you're ashamed of anything, because you don't need constant noise and validation to prove you exist. But there was another reason I didn't talk much about work with my family, and it had absolutely nothing to do with Jessica. It was the way my family treated anything I genuinely cared about, like it was always up for debate. If I said I'd had a particularly hard week, Jessica would immediately say, "Well, you chose that career path." If I said I was exhausted, my dad would say, "Try working a real job sometime." If I said I was proud of something I'd accomplished, Jessica would laugh and say, "Okay, sure, Amanda." After enough of that treatment, you just stop offering pieces of yourself to people who treat them like cheap free samples at the grocery store. So I gave them less and less over time. I told them I was busy with work. I said, everything's fine. I asked about their lives and kept mine completely locked down. When you don't share anything real, people automatically fill in the blanks for you. And Jessica absolutely loved filling in blanks. She turned my intentional silence into supposed proof that I wasn't doing anything actually important. She turned my necessary privacy into a running punchline. She turned my physical absence into a serious character flaw. Must be nice, she'd say sarcastically whenever anyone mentioned my deployments or training cycles, like I was on some extended vacation. My mom would try to soften it sometimes. Jessica, stop. Jessica would just shrug innocently. What? I'm just saying. And my dad would do that tired sigh like he was the unfortunate victim of two equally difficult daughters. By the time I made commander and took actual command, I'd already completely stopped expecting my family to understand anything about my life. I didn't need applause from them anymore. I just needed them to stop actively rewriting my life right in front of me. Tonight at Sarah's wedding, Jessica wasn't just rewriting anymore. She was editing with an absolute chainsaw. Jessica was setting up her final move. And this time she made sure everyone was watching. Across the room, I watched Jessica angle her phone toward my table like she was taking a photo. Maybe she was texting. Maybe she was actually recording something. Jessica loved having receipts, even when the entire story was completely fake. Then I watched her slip behind my dad, lean in really close, and whisper something directly in his ear. My dad's face changed. Not dramatically, just enough to notice. The corners of his mouth tightened, and he nodded once like he'd just been given very specific instructions. Jessica stepped back with that satisfied little look she gets when she knows she's just moved an important piece on the board. And that's when I realized with absolute certainty she wasn't done. Not even close. I watched my dad nod at whatever Jessica had whispered, and my stomach dropped like I'd missed a step going down a staircase in the dark. You'd think I'd be used to this by now. I just wasn't used to it happening at someone else's wedding with a DJ and a photo booth. I forced myself to breathe slowly and stand up like I was just casually stretching my legs. If I stayed glued to my chair, Jessica would come directly to me. If I moved around, at least I could choose where the next hit would land. I walked toward the edge of the dance floor, carefully staying out of the spotlight. Sarah was in the middle of a group of friends, laughing, cheeks flushed in that perfect way a bride should look on her wedding day. I caught her eye and gave her a small, reassuring smile so she wouldn't worry about me. She smiled back, visibly relieved, and turned back to her friends. Good. Let her have that moment. I headed for the little hallway near the restrooms where it was quieter, and nobody tried to make conversation with you unless they desperately needed a breath mint. I leaned against the wall for just a second and let my shoulders drop. Then my mom appeared like she'd been summoned by pure tension in the air. Linda Mitchell could sense family conflict the way some people sense incoming rain. She walked up with that careful, practiced smile that always meant, "Please don't make a scene, even if you're the one being attacked." "Honey," she said, smoothing her dress nervously. "Are you okay?" I looked at her and kept my voice perfectly even. "I'm fine." She didn't believe me for 1 second, but she also didn't want me to say anything more specific. My mom didn't do actual problems. She did damage control. "Your dad," she began hesitantly, then stopped. "What about him?" I asked. She winced visibly. "He shouldn't have said that during the toast." "He shouldn't have said a lot of things," I replied calmly. My mom's eyes flicked past me nervously toward the main reception hall. "Jessica's just, you know how she is." There it was, the family motto again, served up fresh. I stared at her. "Yeah, I do know." My mom lowered her voice even more. "She's been stressed lately. She's just trying to help." "Help who?" I asked directly. She didn't answer because the answer was painfully obvious and deeply embarrassing. "Help Jessica." Before my mom could keep defending the absolutely indefensible, a loud, bright laugh exploded from the main hall. It had Jessica's signature all over it. Big and theatrical, specifically meant to pull heads and grab attention. My mom tensed immediately. "Please," she said softly, "just let it go tonight." I looked at her. And for 1 second I desperately wanted to say what I'd been wanting to say for 20 straight years. Why do I always have to be the one to let it go? But Sarah's wedding was still happening 10 feet away. So I swallowed it. I'm leaving early, I told her. My mom's face tightened with panic. Don't. People will notice. That's kind of the point, I said. Before she could respond, Jessica appeared out of nowhere, holding 2 champagne flutes like she was delivering peace offerings to warring nations. Amanda, she called out, voice sweet and deliberately loud. There you are. My mom's shoulders lifted with immediate panic. Jessica always showed up at the exact moment my mom tried to smooth things over, like she had some kind of radar specifically designed for private conversations. Jessica handed my mom one of the flutes, then offered me the other one with an expectant smile. I didn't take it. Jessica's smile stayed completely fixed. Oh, come on. Don't be weird about it. It's a wedding. I'm not drinking, I said simply. Jessica blinked dramatically. Wow. Still so intense about everything. My mom cleared her throat uncomfortably. Jessica, honey, maybe? Jessica cut her off smoothly, still smiling. I just wanted to check on her. She looked like she was about to cry earlier. I looked Jessica dead in the face. I wasn't. Jessica tilted her head like she was studying a confusing puzzle. See? That tone? You always do that. My mom shifted uncomfortably, clutching her champagne glass like it was a lifeline keeping her afloat. Jessica leaned in closer, lowering her voice just enough to pretend it was private, but definitely not enough to actually be private. I didn't mean anything by what I said, she said innocently. Dad was just joking around. Everybody knows you're Navy. Nobody actually cares about all the specific details. That's funny, I said. You seem to care about the details quite a lot. Jessica's eyes narrowed for half a second. Then she smiled even wider. I care about Sarah having a perfect night, she said. And you know how you get when attention isn't completely on you. There it was, the accusation served cold and casual. My mom inhaled sharply. Jessica. Jessica held up one hand, still smiling brightly. It's okay, Mom. I'm just being honest. I felt my pulse pounding in my ears, but I kept my voice completely calm. If you were being honest, you'd stop talking about me entirely. Jessica laughed, light and fake. See? You're so incredibly sensitive. People can't even joke around you. I stepped back slightly. I'm going back inside. Jessica moved with me, matching my pace like she was personally escorting me to my own public humiliation. As we walked into the main hall, she raised her voice again. Not yelling, just projecting. Hey! Jessica called into a nearby cluster of relatives. Guess who was hiding in the hallway? A couple of heads turned curiously. My uncle gave me a quick glance, then looked away like he absolutely didn't want to get involved in whatever this was. Jessica held her champagne flute up and grinned widely. Amanda was about to sneak out early. I guess military life trained her really well for quick exits. Some people actually chuckled. Not everyone, but enough. I felt my jaw tighten painfully. I kept walking, trying desperately to act like I wasn't the main attraction in Jessica's ongoing performance. We reached the area near the bar where Daniel had been standing earlier. He was across the room now, talking with some of Sarah's relatives. He glanced over and I saw his expression shift immediately when he caught Jessica's tone. Jessica noticed too. Of course she did. Jessica never missed a single camera angle. She took a deliberate step closer to me and said with just enough volume for several nearby tables to hear clearly. Daniel seems like such a nice guy. A real officer. He probably doesn't get to hear much about the administrative side of the Navy. I stopped walking completely. My mom's face went absolutely pale. She knew. She knew Jessica was about to cross a serious line. I turned to Jessica. Drop it. Jessica's smile turned playful. Like I just challenged her to some fun game. Drop what? I'm complimenting you. I'm saying your work matters too. My mom whispered desperately. Jessica, please. Jessica ignored her completely and lifted her voice again, aiming it like a spotlight. Daniel, she called out, waving her champagne flute. Come here for a second. Daniel looked up, clearly surprised. He hesitated briefly, then started walking over, polite, because he's the groom and he can't exactly pretend he didn't hear his own name being called. Sarah's eyes flicked over too. She looked confused, then increasingly uneasy. Daniel reached us and Jessica beamed like she was doing everyone a massive favor. "Daniel, you should really hear about Amanda's Navy job," she said enthusiastically. "She does all this behind-the-scenes stuff at the base, schedules, reports, administrative work. It's honestly impressive in its own way." Daniel's gaze snapped to me, quick and controlled. I gave him a look that clearly said, "Don't." He didn't speak yet. He just stood there, jaw visibly tight. Jessica kept going because she could sense the power in this exact moment. "You know," she said, laughing lightly, "Amanda used to act like she was going to be some kind of big military hero. But, you know, she couldn't really hack it, so now she does the safe stuff." My mom let out a small sound like she'd been physically punched. The words hit me in a weird way. Not because they were new, because she'd said them out loud at a wedding in front of the groom like she was genuinely proud of it. I looked at Jessica and felt something inside me go perfectly still. Daniel's entire posture changed. Subtle but absolutely unmistakable. His shoulders squared, his eyes hardened, and he took a slow breath like he was physically holding back a response that was already completely lined up. Jessica wasn't watching him carefully. She was watching me intently. She wanted me to react. She wanted me to be the dramatic one, the angry one. I didn't give her that satisfaction. I just said evenly, "We're done." Jessica's smile twitched. "Amanda." "No," I said firmly. "I'm not doing this." She opened her mouth again, and that was when my dad appeared behind her, like the final boss in a bad video game. Robert stepped in with that confident look he gets when he thinks he's restoring order to chaos. "What's going on?" he asked, eyes on me, not Jessica. Jessica slid right into his side like she belonged there. "Nothing," she said quickly. "Amanda's upset because we were joking." My dad sighed, already annoyed. "Amanda, come on. Don't do this tonight." I stared at him. "Don't do what?" "Make it weird," he said. "Daniel doesn't need to hear about." He waved his hand vaguely toward me. "All that." Daniel's eyes flicked to my dad, then back to me. My dad didn't even notice. He was too busy doing what he always did, deciding I was the problem before he'd heard the full sentence. I felt Daniel shift beside me like he was about to step forward. I caught his eye again and gave him the smallest shake of my head. He didn't move, but he didn't relax either. Jessica lifted her champagne flute and laughed softly like she'd already won. "See? Dad gets it. Let's just have fun tonight." Daniel's gaze stayed on Jessica for a beat too long, and I knew right then. Jessica had finally pushed the joke past the point where it could stay a joke. Daniel had reached his limit. What he did next changed everything. Daniel's stare didn't soften at all, and that's when I decided I needed fresh air way more than I needed to win an argument with my own DNA. I stepped back carefully, turned slightly like I was headed to the restroom, and walked away before Jessica could grab this moment and turn it into yet another story about my terrible attitude. My mom's eyes followed me with that helpless look, like she wanted to help but didn't know how without making herself the next target. I kept my pace steady and controlled. No storming off, no slamming doors. Just a clean, simple exit. I made it to the side hallway again, the one with the service door and the muffled music, and I leaned my hand against the cool wall for just a second. My heart was beating way too fast for someone who wasn't running. That's the thing about staying calm on the outside. Your body still keeps score internally. Footsteps came behind me. I expected Jessica. I expected my mom. I expected someone to tell me to just let it go one more time. Instead, it was Daniel. He stopped a few feet away, far enough to give me space, close enough to make it absolutely clear he wasn't leaving. "Amanda," he said quietly. I didn't look at him right away. "You should be with Sarah." "I will be," he said. "But I'm not letting that slide." I exhaled slowly and finally faced him. "Daniel." He lifted one hand, not rude, just firm. "I know you told me to do nothing. I'm trying. I really am. But your sister just said you couldn't hack military life." "Yeah," I said flatly. "That's her favorite line." His jaw tightened visibly. "She said it like it was an actual fact." "She's been saying it for years," I replied. Daniel held my gaze. "How does your family not know?" he asked again, quieter this time. "They're talking about you like you're not who you actually are." I let out a short laugh that had absolutely no humor in it. They know enough. They just don't respect it. Daniel shook his head slowly. Your dad believes Jessica. Because it's easier than admitting he didn't pay attention. I finished for him. Daniel looked like he wanted to argue, then stopped. He seemed to realize he was stepping into a family system he couldn't possibly fix in a hallway. Amanda, he said carefully, I've sat in operational briefs with you. You ran those rooms. You're not a desk job. You're Q. I leaned back against the wall again. Please don't do the whole "you're amazing" speech. I don't need a pep talk right now. His lips pressed together. It's not a pep talk. It's a fact. I looked at him for a long moment, then said what I hadn't said clearly enough before. Daniel, this stays between us, I repeated firmly. No public corrections. No big speeches. Sarah does not deserve that kind of drama. Daniel's eyes narrowed. So you're just going to let them keep lying? I kept my voice steady. I'm going to let the wedding be a wedding. He stared at me like he couldn't decide if that was noble or completely insane. Then he said, Can I ask you something without you thinking I'm judging you? I shrugged. Sure. Why didn't you ever tell them? He asked. About command. About anything real. I didn't love that question because it sounded like blame, even when people didn't mean it that way. So I gave him the simplest, most honest answer. Because every time I shared something real about my life, they made it smaller. I said. So I stopped sharing. Daniel's face tightened. That's awful. It's practical, I corrected. They can't mock what they don't understand. And they don't understand what they don't hear. Daniel's expression shifted slightly, like he was putting pieces together in real time. Your sister, he said slowly. She's not just joking around. She's actively trying to define you. Yes, I said. Thank you. That's exactly the word. Define. Daniel stared at the floor for a second, then back at me. And you let her. I pushed off the wall sharper than I meant to. No. I endure her. He blinked. I'm sorry. That came out wrong. It's fine, I said, then softened my tone. Look, Jessica feeds on reaction. She wants me to correct her so she can call me arrogant. She wants me to argue so she can say I ruined the mood. She wants me emotional because then she gets to be the calm, reasonable one. Daniel's eyes flashed with understanding. So the only way to win is not to play at all. In that room, I said, nodding toward the reception hall. Yes. Daniel's shoulders lifted as he breathed in deeply. Then he exhaled slowly, like he was forcing himself to accept an order he absolutely hated. Okay, he said. I won't blow up your family at my own wedding. Thank you, I said sincerely. He looked at me then said, I need to understand something. I raised an eyebrow. He lowered his voice even more. Does your sister know that I know? I hesitated. Not yet. Daniel nodded once. She will. She's watching everything. I didn't argue. Yes. Daniel shifted his weight, clearly restless. So what's the plan? There isn't one, I said. I'll leave early. That's my plan. Daniel's mouth tightened. And you're okay with that? I stared at him. No. But I'm capable of it. He held my gaze, then said, Amanda, your dad just told a room full of people you couldn't hack military life. And Jessica repeated it, I added. Daniel's eyes darkened. In front of me. I almost smiled. Yeah, she's bold. Or careless, he said. I didn't respond because that was the first genuinely hopeful thing I'd heard all night. Careless people make mistakes. Daniel's phone buzzed in his pocket. He checked it quickly, then grimaced. Sarah's looking for me, he said, like he was annoyed at the timing even though he loved his wife. We're supposed to do photos with her aunt. I nodded. Go be the groom. He looked at me like he wanted to do more. Like he wanted to pull out his military ID and slap it on a table somewhere. Instead he said, I'm sorry you're dealing with this. I shrugged. I've dealt with worse. He gave a short, humorless laugh. Yeah, I believe that. Daniel moved toward the door, then paused with his hand on the handle. One more thing, he said. I looked at him. He spoke carefully, like he was choosing words that wouldn't trigger alarms. You're still the commanding officer, right? Not just selected. Actually in command. Yes, I said. In command. He nodded, as if hearing it again made it even more absurd that people were calling me support staff. Okay, he said quietly. Then I'm going to treat you like it. I frowned slightly. What does that mean? It means, he said, I'm not going to stand there and let someone disrespect my CO like it's party entertainment. I felt my pulse jump. Daniel. He held up both hands. I'm not saying I'm going to make a scene. I'm saying I'm going to be careful. And if I have to choose between being polite and being honest. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. I looked at him and felt a strange mix of gratitude and dread, because Daniel was right and Jessica was absolutely watching. Daniel opened the door and stepped back into the noise and light of the reception. I stayed in the hallway a beat longer, listening to the music and the laughter, trying to decide whether I wanted to disappear completely or finally be seen. Then I walked out again. Jessica had repositioned herself even closer to the head table, like she was setting up for the next round. And when she spotted me returning, she lifted her glass in a little toast of her own, smiling like she already knew exactly how this was going to end. But Jessica had miscalculated something crucial. She'd pushed Daniel too far. And unlike my family, Daniel actually understood what respect looked like. What happened next I didn't plan. I didn't ask for it. And honestly, part of me wanted to stop it. But another part of me, the part that had been made small for 20 years, wanted to finally be seen. Daniel didn't make a big announcement. He didn't grab the microphone. He did something simpler and somehow more powerful. He walked right up to my dad, who was standing near the head table with a drink in his hand, laughing with relatives. Jessica was right beside him, perfectly positioned. Daniel stopped directly in front of them. My dad looked up and smiled that broad, friendly smile he uses on strangers. Daniel, my man. Dad said. Having a good night? Jessica grinned. Hey, Groom. Daniel didn't smile back. He didn't frown either. He just stood there, shoulders squared, voice steady. Sir, Daniel said. Can I speak with you for a moment? My dad's smile faltered slightly, then recovered. Sure, what's up? Daniel lowered his voice, but not enough. Not in a crowded room with polished floors and people who absolutely live for gossip. I think there's been a serious misunderstanding about Amanda's naval career, he said. Jessica's smile tightened immediately. What misunderstanding? Daniel kept his eyes on my dad. The way you described her job tonight isn't accurate. My dad chuckled like Daniel was teasing him. Oh, come on. It's family. We joke. Daniel didn't laugh. Respectfully, sir, it didn't sound like a joke. That word, respectfully, made my dad straighten noticeably. In my father's mind, respectfully is what you say right before you tell someone they're completely wrong. Dad's eyes narrowed. Daniel, are you offended on Amanda's behalf? I'm concerned, Daniel said. Because what was said about her? Jessica leaned in, sweet as sugar. Daniel, you're new to the family. You don't know how Amanda is. She gets sensitive about work. Daniel's gaze flicked to Jessica for half a second. Not angry, just assessing, like he'd finally spotted the person actually holding the steering wheel. Then he looked back at my dad. Sir, I've worked with Commander Mitchell. My dad blinked. Commander. Jessica's eyes flashed and she jumped in fast. He means that's how they talk at work. They call everyone Commander. It's a Navy thing. Daniel's jaw tightened. He kept his voice calm. No, ma'am. I mean her rank. The air shifted around us. It wasn't silent yet, but nearby conversations slowed noticeably, like people sensed something more interesting than chicken and dancing was happening. My dad stared at Daniel like he'd spoken a foreign language. Her rank is what? Daniel took a breath. Commander. Oh, 5. In a lot of revenge stories, people think revenge has to be loud, some big speech, some public meltdown, some moment designed for applause. Jessica let out a laugh that sounded way too sharp. Okay, that's not. Daniel didn't look at her. He addressed my dad again. Sir, with respect, Amanda is not in an administrative support role. She's a submarine officer. She's in command. My dad's face went through several expressions in quick succession. Confusion, disbelief, then something defensive, like he'd been accused of bad parenting in public. That's not possible, Dad said. Daniel's voice didn't rise. Didn't need to. It is, sir. Jessica cut in, voice louder now, trying to take control. Daniel, I don't know what Amanda told you, but she exaggerates. She's always done that. I felt my jaw clench so hard my teeth hurt. Daniel turned slightly toward Jessica for the first time. Ma'am, he said, measured. I'm not repeating something she told me. I'm telling you what I know from work. Jessica's smile faltered for the first time all night. Just a crack. My dad's eyes moved between Daniel and Jessica, and I could see his brain desperately searching for the version of reality that would let him stay right. Uncle Richard leaned in from Dad's side. What's going on? Aunt Karen stopped mid-sentence and turned her head. Sarah's mom drifted closer, face tense. Sarah herself was a few feet away now, watching with wide eyes, like she couldn't decide if she should step in or pretend she didn't see it. The room had started to notice. My dad lowered his voice, trying to pull it back. Daniel, this is not the time. Daniel didn't budge. Sir, the time was before your toast. The time was before your daughter got pointed at like a joke. My dad's cheeks reddened. I wasn't pointing at her like a joke. Daniel's tone stayed perfectly even. You said she couldn't hack military life. You said she does desk work. You said she's not like real officers. My dad opened his mouth, then closed it because he couldn't deny it. Too many people had heard him. Jessica stepped closer to my dad, voice suddenly soft. Dad, don't listen to this. He's confused. Daniel's eyes flicked to me, and I realized he'd finally noticed I'd been standing there the whole time. I hadn't spoken yet. I was still trying to keep this wedding from turning into a public trial, but the trial had started without me. Dad looked at me, then at Daniel, face pale. Amanda, he said slowly. What is this? The crowd around us grew by inches. People do that thing where they pretend they're just walking by, but really they're circling closer. I felt my throat tighten, but I kept my voice calm. It's not this, Dad. It's my life. His eyes widened slightly. Daniel is saying you're in command. Jessica laughed again, trying to break the tension. He's being dramatic. Daniel ignored her completely. Sir, she is the commanding officer. My dad's face went even paler. Of what? Daniel paused for a fraction of a second, like he was checking himself. Like he understood there were lines you don't cross even when you're furious. Then he answered in a way that didn't give anything classified away. An attack submarine, he said. That's all I'll say here. That was enough to make the phrase desk job die completely in midair. Someone behind me whispered. Wait, what? Another voice murmured. No way. My dad looked like he might need to sit down. He didn't. He just stood there, staring at me like he was seeing a complete stranger wearing my face. Amanda, he said again, softer this time. Is that true? I could feel the entire room leaning in. Jessica's breath quickened beside my dad. Sarah's hand hovered near her mouth. My mom looked like she was about to cry. And in that moment, I realized something uncomfortable but true. This wasn't just about my dad's ignorance. This was about Jessica's control. She had built an entire story about me for years, and my family had accepted it because it was easy, because it let them keep me in the box that made sense to them. Now the box was cracking wide open. I met my dad's eyes and kept my voice steady. Yes, I said. It's true. Jessica's smile vanished completely. My dad's mouth opened, but nothing came out. And Daniel, still standing there like a wall between me and the worst version of my family, took a slow breath, turned slightly toward the watching crowd, and spoke clearly enough that the nearest tables could hear. With respect, he said, I think you owe Commander Mitchell an apology. The word apology hit the air like someone had dropped a glass on the floor. And for a second nobody moved at all. What I learned that night is simple. Family drama doesn't stop because you keep the peace. It stops when you finally stop negotiating your dignity. But real family revenge usually looks quieter than that. It's telling the truth once without begging to be believed. It's setting a boundary without explaining it 5 different ways. It's walking away from people who only feel tall when you're made small. My sister didn't lose because I embarrassed her. She lost because she couldn't control the story anymore. And I finally stopped letting my own family define my Navy career like it was a rumor. Tell me in the comments. Have you ever had to set a hard boundary with family? And if you've dealt with something similar, share your story below. You're not alone in this. Subscribe for more stories about standing your ground and reclaiming your life, because sometimes the bravest thing you can do is simply tell the truth. If you're listening to stories like this, real family drama where the truth hits harder than yelling, hit that subscribe button and stick around. I post stories like this all the time, and you definitely don't want to miss what comes next.